And I'll now turn it over to our staff to do How Does OTC Market Technology?
Hi, good afternoon. Oh, welcome to this webinar about marketing UK technologies. As Jackie said, it's hosted by UK's Office of Technology Commercialization. And your presenters today are OTC's two commercialization managers, me, Natasha Jones, and Raja Krishnan. We promote UK technologies to companies with the goal of finding a partner to license the technology and develop it into a product or service. Next slide, please. Commercializing a technology begins with research in a UK lab or clinical setting, resulting in an invention. Next, the inventor reports the invention to our office through an easy-to-complete online form. And if you have an invention from your lab or clinical practice that you would like to tell our office about, please contact Matt Upton. He's the head of the intellectual property group in our office. While UK is pursuing the appropriate protection for the invention, which is typically a patent, Raj and I are also marketing the technology to potential licensees. Hopefully, we secure a licensing deal for the technology, and the company that has licensed it then invests additional research and development into it, resulting in a product or service. Next slide. Raja and I use 4 methods to market UK technologies. We all do all of these, but I'm going to address the first 2, and Raja will do the second. I will talk to you about how we target companies through direct email to people in the business development or scientific groups within a company, and post marketing abstracts of our technologies to a searchable database. Raja will then cover utilizing conferences and LinkedIn to connect with potential licensees. Next slide. Before we market a technology, we work closely with the inventors to prepare a marketing abstract. A marketing abstract is a short, non-confidential summary that highlights the key elements of a technology. It's written for non-scientists, as most tech scouts for companies don't have scientific backgrounds. Next slide. Here is an example of a marketing abstract I created for a novel herbicide with a new mode of action. As you can see, it's very succinct. We want to get straight to the point so that a tech scout can quickly grasp what the technology is about. We begin the marketing abstract with an overview of the problem. In this case, that farmers need new methods of combating weeds as plants become resistant to herbicides. Next, we explain how the UK technology can solve that problem. Here, we have a herbicide that has a new mode of action and was shown to be effective against a wide variety of weeds. Next, we list the applications of the technology, meaning the fields in which it could be used, and summarize the advantages the UK technology has over alternatives. We also state the technology stage of development, such as having conducted field trials in this example of the herbicide. Depending on the technology, other stages of development could be that it was tested in mouse models, that there's a beta version of software, or that a pilot plant is in operation. Finally, we link to the patent application or issued patents on Google Patents so that a tech scout can get more information quickly about the technology, and we cite any relevant publications. The marketing abstract also includes contact information for the commercialization manager handling each technology, so that a reader knows who to contact for more information. I use this marketing abstract as an example of a direct email campaign that I initiated. I identified about 30 companies in the herbicide market and sent the marketing abstract along with a short email about how our herbicide could complement other products that each company already has on the market. About 10 companies wanted to learn more, and so I set up conference calls among the company, our office, and the inventor, after having had the company sign a non-disclosure agreement so that our inventor could talk freely about the technology without jeopardizing patent protection. These conversations led to several companies wanting to test the materials on their own greenhouses and field sites, and we entered into about 5 or 6 material evaluation licenses, under which the inventor provided a sample and instructions on how to use the material. The company's tests showed that, the application method of the herbicide affected its effectiveness, and that the raw materials making up the herbicide were too expensive for the companies to incorporate into products. So while this marketing campaign did not lead to a license, it shouldn't be considered a failure because we received valuable insights from these material evaluation experiments. Next slide. Another tool we use to publicize our technologies is posting them to a searchable database. If you'd like to look at the technologies that UK has on offer, just go to our website, the OTC website, and first click on Industry Partners. Next slide. And then on this website, you would then go under Search Available Technologies and click on the hyperlinked word Flintbox. Flintbox is the platform that we use, and you'll often hear the commercialization managers talk about posting something to Flintbox. That just means that we put it out there publicly available on this platform for anyone to find. Okay, next slide, Jackie. After clicking on Flintbox, this takes you to a page of all the technologies for which we've created marketing abstracts. In the layout you see here, the technologies are shown with most recent posts at the top of the page so that anyone that checks our website regularly can see what new has been disclosed. But they can also be sorted by the category in which they fall, such as medical devices, crop science, which would be the category for the herbicide that I mentioned, and carbon emissions. Keyword searching is also available. We receive many inquiries about technologies posted to Flintbox, and as with the email marketing campaigns, when we receive interest, we get a non-disclosure agreement in place and have calls in our office to company inventors so that the company can learn more about the technology. So that was very brief. I know it seems like I didn't have a lot to say, but creating these marketing abstracts and promoting them is actually quite a lot of work. And so, next slide, Jackie. So to help us with that, we're hiring. We're looking for a graduate or professional student or a postdoc to work in our office about 10 hours a week as part of the commercialization and licensing team. The work would involve writing these marketing abstracts, working on marketing campaigns, and other marketing projects. If you or someone in your lab is interested in this, please contact Raja. We've had a lot of graduate students and postdocs in our office that have worked with Matt Upton in the IP group. And so now we're looking for someone to help the commercialization and licensing team. And we'd be really excited to have a talented student or postdoc join our group. All right. Like I said, that was very brief. And now over to you, Raja.
Thanks, Natasha. Hi, I'm Raja Krishnan. And today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my strategies and tips to effectively network at conferences, and also how to use LinkedIn to get expert feedback on various technologies. So before we get started, let's do something interactive with the audience, and let's put a poll out there, Jackie. And with this poll, we're going to look at how many conferences do you guys attend per year? This is pre-COVID now. So assume it's pre-COVID, and let's see how many people attend and how many conferences. Please enter the vote for a couple seconds here. Okay, so here are the results of the poll. Yeah, it looks like there are a few that don't attend conferences, but most of us attend between 1 and 3, some of us even more than that. That's great, that's great. So I myself attend at least 2 to 3 conferences if possible. So we've all been to conferences, and so now I'm going to share with you what works for me, and specifically in regards to networking. Next slide, please. So one of the purposes, right, to go to conference is to meet new people. And I encourage you, when you're having discussions, when you're in these introductory conversations with a new person that you're just meeting, or it could be a group of people, right, that you're meeting, that you start to make these mental notes while you're having this conversation about what's common, what's the commonality that you have with the person you're talking to. Common interests, or it could be common things like you guys used to live in the same state or the same city before, grew up in the same neighborhood. Or you guys are, alums of the same university. So try to make some mental notes of what's happening in the conversation, or if it's an interesting topic you're discussing. And then also at the same time, start to register, what could be the potential business opportunities here, and how could we, engage in some type of collaboration. Then as you end the conversation, before you leave or the person you're talking to leaves, make sure to get a business card. And when you leave, as you're walking away, going to your next conversation, I would suggest that you take out that business card, flip it to the back where there's white space, and jot down those notes, right? So jot down the notes that you were thinking about before you forget, while it's still fresh in your mind. I'm not sure about those of us in the audience, but definitely it's happened to me where, instances where you've gathered all these business cards in a conference and then you come back home and then you start realizing there are these cards and you don't even know like how you met this person, who this person is, and what you talked about, and how that type of relationship could be beneficial. And that situation can be frustrating. So I highly encourage, just take those few seconds to jot down these notes right after each and every conversation that you have. Now, one thing to just make a note to those of you in the audience that are academic scientists, if you're not already doing this, then I highly encourage and recommend proactively reaching out to the scientists that work in industry, so those industry scientists, and get their feedback on your research. Talk about what they're doing and do the same thing. Get business cards from them and jot down those notes. And it would be great if after the conference, when you have a few minutes of time, to make copies of the front and back of those business cards and email them to our office. That way we know who you've interacted with, what companies you've met, what might have, what you've talked about. And on our side, we can make connections to the business side of those companies. So we can have in parallel discussions. And what I've learned with talking with a lot of different companies is when we're talking about drawing in, let's say, more sponsored research for our university, it's really, really driven by that interaction between the academic scientists and the industry scientists. It's that engagement, that connection, and that communication that's really the driving force. So us on the business side can definitely facilitate, but it's driven by this interaction between the scientists from academia and industry. Now, you're at the conference. At the end of your day at the conference, go back to your hotel room. So next thing is, dinner, right? But before you head out for dinner, I'd strongly recommend and suggest that you go to your computer, laptop, and hop onto LinkedIn. And get onto LinkedIn and send out invitations to connect, with all the people that you met on that particular day. And I strongly encourage doing this while it's fresh in your mind. We meet a lot of people at conferences, and the people that we're trying to connect with, they're also meeting a lot of people. So the sooner you do it, the more likely it is that the person you're trying to connect with, remembers the conversation that you had and knows who you are. So, and another thing, just a little, another little anecdote, little story here, which I'm sure most of you and myself have gone through this is, it's so hectic at a conference. You go from room to room, you're switching rooms, and it's really hectic. And you might lose a business card, or you might, misplace it. And then you come back after the conference and realize, hey, I'm missing something. I'm missing a card. And that could be frustrating too, because perhaps this was a person that you really wanted to engage with or really wanted to follow up with. So it could be frustrating. So again, send that invitation out in LinkedIn as soon as possible. And just in case you lose the business card, you still have that LinkedIn connection invite that's there. So that's my suggestion. Next slide, please. So when you're sending out connections on LinkedIn, I encourage that it's not just the invitation itself. Include a personal message, and that personal message is going to draw on the notes that you took right after your conversations. So, usually what I do is I've got all my business cards sitting there on my table, desk in the hotel room, and I go through each business card, flip and look at the back, search for the person, write an appropriate message, and, send it out with the invite. In LinkedIn, there is a limit of 300 characters to go in the message. So you got to be efficient in writing your message, to get everything across that you want to. So I know, I understand in Twitter that there is a 280 character limit, right? And although I don't tweet, I understand that, it takes some expertise and skill to be able to effectively, get your message across and actually tweet. So same thing in LinkedIn, be efficient and try to get a concise message across when you do that intro invite. So here's a sample message. So you could say something like, "Hi, Joe. It was great to meet another Cornell alum that grew up in the Princeton area at Autumn." Again, this is going back to that commonality in the conversation that we had. Then I look forward to sharing with you some cancer therapeutics assets from University of Kentucky to get your expert feedback. This is again going to the business component, and then end it with, it'd be great to connect. So these are some of the things that, this is the kind of the way that I would suggest in terms of connecting with people on LinkedIn. So we're really looking here for expert feedback. That's what we want in the end. And there are a lot of innovative and exciting technologies in a university, and many of them could be at a very early stage. So we're looking at, we were more than happy to receive feedback that's either positive or negative. So we welcome all feedback. And it would be great to get a feedback that says, more than just, no, we're not interested in this technology, but something a little bit more than that if possible. And, any other suggestions that the company might have in terms of, what the potential might be in the future for, let's say, a sponsored research project, or how advanced does the technology need to get in order for that company to be interested in, a license and negotiating for a license. Or if, let's say that faculty member is interested in a faculty-founded startup, and what would the company do in terms of, would they consider investing in a startup in the future? So it would be good to know all sorts of suggestions and guidance, whether positive or negative. And this, helps me in my role in our office, but also helps the academic scientists. Now, the scientists know that this is the feedback, this is how far we need to go. This is when industry might be interested in coming to the table to have a discussion and to learn more about that particular technology. So right now I'm going to throw in another poll question here, and this is going to be about LinkedIn and how often do each of us use LinkedIn? So it's up, the poll's up. Take a couple seconds to enter your vote. So the results are in. It's a little bit of a bimodal distribution, I would say. So we've got, like 40% that use it every day, and then you've got another about 35 to 40%, I guess almost 40% that rarely use it. So it's very interesting results in the poll. So I myself, I use LinkedIn every day, and actually LinkedIn, beyond just what we're talking about here, in terms of LinkedIn being a business development tool to connect with people, network, and seek expert feedback on technologies. For me personally, it's my daily source of the latest scientific news. So, I go through in my feed, and that's where my science is. It's really cool and interesting, but that's where I get my science news from. The latest news is LinkedIn. And another interesting to point, just yesterday evening, I was scrolling through my feed, and I came across 3 different virtual events that were occurring in the near future, and they all sounded interesting, and I would not have found out about any of those events if I had not been on LinkedIn. I would not have gotten an email, nothing else, right? So I was on LinkedIn, and I found out about these particular webinars and virtual events. One was a partnering event. So, especially in this type of environment, in the COVID environment, we're going to have more and more of these virtual conferences, virtual events. They're going to be taking place, in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And, you know, if you're on LinkedIn, then you'll be more tuned in to what's happening, and you're going to be able to attend those conferences, which is great. Next slide, please. So one aspect of LinkedIn is getting expert feedback, like I mentioned. So one of the features on LinkedIn is something called in-mail messages. So this is with a person that you're not yet connected with. And here I suggest, again, to be concise and to the point with their title of your message so that it attracts that particular contact to open and read the message, right? So here's an example, right? So I might say, request for expert feedback on an innovative technology, right? And then you want a clear message. And here's an example of a message. I write, you know, hi XYZ, I'm a commercialization manager at University of Kentucky. I talk about one of our researchers that has invented this novel device, and that I'm interested in getting their company's feedback, right? Expert feedback. And if I could send them some non-confidential information to get that expert feedback. A little while later, I get a response saying to go ahead and send that to him. And I sent him this marketing abstract, which Natasha talked about. He had given me his email address. And one thing to point out here, and I just want to point your attention to, is look at the timestamps. This is the same day. So, you know, several hours later, I've already gotten a response. And what I want to indicate here is that there are people like myself and a lot of people that are very actively engaged in LinkedIn and do welcome and appreciate these type of messages. So I encourage this type of reach out. And you can see how quickly they respond. It may not be always the case that they respond this quickly, but this gives you an instance that it could be pretty fast response. Next slide. Here's another example. This was a really for me, it was kind of cool. I had heard about this company and CEO through a podcast that I was listening to. And so then I found that there could be some interesting connection between the research that we do here at University of Kentucky and what this company was working on. So I went on to LinkedIn, and I sent this message, you know, to connect. I was trying to connect with the person here. And I said, hi, XYZ, learned about your company by this podcast that you did with, you know, ABC, and that it was a, you know, really fascinating company, and that there could be some synergies between the research going on at University of Kentucky and what they have going on, and, you know, that it would be good to connect. The person literally, I think within a few hours, accepted my invite to connect. And here's my message after. So I immediately follow up with this message that I'm thanking them for their accepting the invite, and again, connect the dots on how I got to know about them, and that there could be an opportunity to collaborate maybe. So I attach a document. So on LinkedIn, it's really hit or miss here. LinkedIn does have a feature in their messaging where you can attach a document to the message. I found that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I attached this document, which was the marketing abstract, and attached it to that message, and also asked for the person's best email address so I can send that same information to the email address. Next slide, please. So here's the response that I got, and this was 2 days later. That's still pretty quick. And this particular person works is a CEO at a startup company that's really, really active, and she does a lot of traveling. So this was the message, you know, like, great to connect. Thank you for your note and the information, and just stating that although they're not doing research in that particular area, their goal is still to have the best platform ultimately, and that they really would be happy to set up a call to talk to us more and to learn more about that with our researcher. And even stating that there might be a potential for a collaboration in the long term, and given their email address. So, you know, this is really great. And even with that quick type of response that you see there, we're still, in these two examples that I've cited here, we're still in communication with both of these companies and kind of actively engaging with them, giving them updates, and it's been productive, and hopefully it leads to even more productive things in the future. So I'd like to, kind of finish off here by saying that I'm a real believer in LinkedIn, especially to get, connected with these different types of experts in the field and to try to get their feedback on different innovative technologies. And if you're one of those that haven't had the time or haven't used LinkedIn much yet, I really encourage you to do so. Just try to build up your profile, try to make it as complete as possible. And, in my opinion, I think that there is something to the fact that if you have a more complete profile and you're more active on LinkedIn, there might be a better chance that you get a more quicker response on some of these proactive kind of cold call messages that you're sending out there. Overall, I think this, it's a great tool, LinkedIn is, and it's a great resource. Next slide, please. So last and not least, encourage you to check out these podcasts. They may lead to interesting connections, and I've learned from that. And I really listen to podcasts with a purpose and an intention. And my intention is to figure out if there is a connection, right? To keep alert and aware. Is there some type of connection? Can I connect the dots somewhere? So here are some podcasts that I've listened to. There's a podcast it's by Daniel Levine. It's his podcast, Daniel Levine's podcast. And his podcast is focused on rare disease space. And it's usually about 30 to 40 minutes. So it's not too long of a podcast. You can listen to it during lunchtime or maybe on a drive. It's a very high level in terms of the science and talks a little bit about the business. He interviews scientists, executives, entrepreneurs. Another podcast some of you may have heard of as well is Timmerman's Long Run podcast. I really enjoy this one a lot, and it's a little bit longer. It's about an hour and a half typically, and goes into a little more depth specifically about that particular scientist or executive's journey through their career and how their career was shaped and about their company. So still a little bit more into the science than Daniel Levine, but still at a high level. And his podcast is all encompassing. It doesn't focus necessarily on just rare diseases. He covers everything. And, finally here, I know there's a lot of these deep science related podcasts, which are great learning. It's apt to talk about this now, given our COVID environment. There are two podcasts that I would suggest. One is called Immune, and as the name implies, it's related to immunology. And I've started listening to this podcast recently, and I really enjoy it. Another podcast is called TWIV, and that's focusing on virology and viruses. And these two podcasts, they're led by the same podcaster. His name is Dr. Recagnello. He's a virologist in Colombia. It's along with him and couple other colleague podcasters. So, and this is a final note here for students. If you're taking, you're going to be taking your courses, you're going to be doing your own research. I think listening to these type of podcasts could serve as a great complement to what you're learning in the classroom as well as what you're doing in the lab. So I think it could serve as a really good complement, and I recommend it. So I'll wrap up here. And so thanks for, engaging and listening to our webinar from myself and Natasha. And right now we open up to any types of questions.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Raja and Natasha. We appreciate you talking about how OTC markets technology. We do have some questions, and if anyone else has questions, please put them in the chat. The first question, Raja, is for you. Can you talk about the success rate of conversations at conferences? Like how many hits you might get, how many conversations it may take to get a hit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, if you're talking about a hit in terms of establishing that connection, I think in almost every single conversation that I've had, we can make that connection and stay connected, whether it's on LinkedIn. Now, if it's referring to what actually materializes into, let's say, a collaboration or relationship, that's more of a long run thing. And, I think for me, for myself, that face-to-face type of meeting and having that connection is the greatest. So I don't know if there's an actual percentage that I would cite to what actually leads to, that's hard to actually pinpoint. But I would say it's much higher than if you're just going to email the person or cold call the person.
Thanks, Raja. Another question for you. Do you see any benefit for paying for the premium subscription in LinkedIn?
Yeah, I do actually. So I myself subscribe to the premium subscription. I guess one of the levels, I don't know what the level is now. It's been a while since I've checked the different levels of subscription, but you do, I was mentioning there's one thing that was featured that was called an in-mail feature. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know what they've done if with the unpaid version, but I don't know if that in-mail still exists. Either it exists or it's at a they don't allow you to send too many of them. If you get one of I guess the package that I'm in, I get 15 in-mails, 15 free in-mails along with that. And so that's great. So you could just, and that doesn't limit you. So I was telling before that there is a limit when you try to connect with somebody. There's a limit of 300 characters when you're trying to make that initial connection. When you do an in-mail, you get a lot of space to write what you want. So you can go into a little bit more detail on what you write. And my success rate on those in-mails has been really high. Really high. I would say it's more than, it's got to be more than 50%. It's better than doing emails to cold emails to a person. And I don't know if I want to say 75%, it really varies, but, and so you get this amount of, I think you get like 15 in-mails that you can do per period of time. I don't know if it's every month or so, but every time you make a successful connection, that is that the person actually replies to you, then you get reinstated that credit. So you don't lose it. So for every successful communication that you do, you get that in-mail credit back. So I think it's a great feature. So yes, I do recommend having the, having a premium LinkedIn feature.
Thank you, Raja. Natasha, this question is for you. Can you talk a little bit about how often Flintbox provides connections with the industry?
Yeah, so our office receives about 1 inquiry a month from Flintbox. But of course, we need to keep uploading new technologies and get them out there and have things to attract. So I would think that the more that we put out there, the more inquiries we will receive. And that's why it'd be great to have a commercialization and licensing fellow to help out with writing some of these marketing abstracts. Every year our invention disclosures go up, and so we have more marketing abstracts that we have to prepare, so we'd be very welcome to have a student or postdoc help out with that. Some companies I have received multiple inquiries from for different technologies, and then other times it's a one-off. Right now, and Flintbox, by the way, is free to use. Anybody can set up an account and search it. So it's open to anyone. And right now I am working on a material evaluation license with a Canadian company that saw my posting about an asphalt and concrete repair technology and emailed me either that day or the following day. So there are companies out there that have tech scouts that go to Flintbox every day and see what's new and if it fits one of their needs.
Thank you, Natasha. This is for either one of you that wants to answer. Can you address how to find virtual conferences during the pandemic and how to best network at virtual events?
I can go first since I kind of touched on this. So for me, like I said, there's a lot of things coming on LinkedIn in my feed. And as I mentioned, I found out about 3 conferences yesterday evening. These are virtual events. And once you find one organization that does this conference, you can then after that get on their newsletter. So then you'll get those periodic emails, right? So then it's more easier. But finding those initial conferences, for me, it's come across, like I said, in LinkedIn for me. The other things, so yeah, in terms of following that, yeah, you got to join certain groups. There you go. You got the answer there, but you got to join certain groups, and that would be the best way to do that, or get connected. So yeah, I think in terms of the virtual events, At the virtual event itself, there are different platforms that people are starting to use, again, because of this COVID environment. And there are some pretty neat platforms that I've seen. And there's one platform where you literally, they still have this networking time, and you enter into the platform where you see a view of all these tables that are out there, and you can go and click on spots on the table to be seated at, and you see who else is sitting there. And once you click on a spot at a table, it opens up a video, like a Zoom or like a video call with these other individuals that are at that table. And then you can have the conversation with them, and then you could leave, right? So that's really interesting. You know, one of the organizations that I would suggest looking into is, I know Mass Bio is, you know, it says Mass for Massachusetts. Yes, it started there, but they're really extending beyond that, and they've got a lot of virtual events that they do, Mass Bio, and you know, a lot of other universities. So I imagine, you know, some of you out there might have found out about this particular webinar through LinkedIn, right? So a lot of universities are starting to do this. I think I've seen UCLA do some webinar events. So there's a lot of different organizations and other universities like ourselves that are doing similar types of events and webinars.
Thank you, Raja. This question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I had something to add, Jackie.
Yes, please, Natasha.
When we have attended in-person events, and I assume it would work the same way for a virtual event, Roger and I look at the list of attendees and identify which companies are being represented, and if any of those companies have a field that one of our technologies would apply to. And so we use the messaging capabilities through the registration app for the conference to set up a 15-minute meeting where we can pitch a marketing abstract and tell them a bit more about the technology. You might be able to send like the abstract itself directly through a conference app, but I haven't done that. And so I think, you know, if you can identify people to meet with, it's more efficient and probably results in more effective networking than just like randomly bumping into people at tables or over lunch.
Yeah, and the last thing to add here is on the note of virtual conferences, again, you know, there's just a lot of them out there, and since a lot of things are going virtual because they can't be face-to-face now, and some of these that normally might have had higher registration fees, they're now lower registration fees, or some of them are free. So again, for those students out there, it might be definitely within your economic range to start attending some of these virtual conferences. And I think it really, you know, I guess the silver lining, if you might want to say, to this could be that we're going to be exposed to so much more in this virtual environment now, and we're going to get access to things that are across the country and across the world.
Thanks, Raja and Natasha. I have a question about whether you still consider cold telephone calls to be effective.
I have never done that. I email people cold all the time, and I have absolutely no problem doing that. You know, I'm not shy or anything. And with the marketing campaigns, that's exactly what it is. It's a cold email, and I'll start with, you know, let me introduce myself. I'm a commercialization manager at the University of Kentucky, and we have a novel herbicide that we think would incorporate with your organic chemicals product line or something like that. I try to keep the email pretty short, maybe 6 or 7 lines. I get to the heart of the problem. I say that I've attached this PDF of a marketing abstract, and that if they'd like to, you know, learn more information, just let me know, and I can provide, well, after signing an NDA, I could provide a copy of a patent application that has not yet been made publicly available, or I would send them, you know, a PDF of a patent application or a patent. Sometimes our inventors also have YouTube videos demonstrating the technology that I'll share as a follow-up, or publications or a slide deck where they explain the technology and its applications. But as far as cold calls, I haven't had any experience with that. How about you, Raja?
What was the question again?
Do you ever cold call companies to tell them about our technologies? I always use email instead of the telephone.
Yeah, no, I have not done that in a long time, actually. So I don't really cold call much. Yeah, rely on whether it's email and yeah, I'm telling you, I rely heavily on LinkedIn. So emailing and LinkedIn is the way that I go. So I haven't done cold calling in a long time, and I don't think it's tougher to do cold calling, right? You don't even know if the person's there, and so I think these other mechanisms are more effective.
Thank you. Speaking of email, do you see any benefit to using something like MailChimp for email campaigns?
I prefer to personalize each email with something about the company or its product lines and how that could work with the technology that UK is developing. It takes a bit more time, but I feel like if I was the recipient, I would like to know that someone has put a little bit more effort into crafting this email than just generating it from a set of like name, email, recipient, company name, that you'll pull from a database.
Raja, do you have anything to add?
No, not to MailChimp.
Okay. We did have someone who would like you to mention the names of the podcast again and the name of the David L. podcast.
Are you gonna, can you go back to that slide? I can just show them the slide again, right?
Yes. Oh, hold on. It just all went away. Sorry. It's finicky sometimes.
Yeah, so these are the podcast. I mean, this is not by any means all encompassing, obviously. These are just some of the ones that I listen to, and that are focused in the pharma life sciences space. But yeah, there are a lot. There's also a platform. I haven't used it as much recently, but I found out about it, I guess, late last year. It's called Podchaser. So that's something to check out as well, where they have a whole bunch of different podcasts that are there, but you need to check out the platform. So that's Podchaser is one to probably check out as well.
Thanks, Raja. Can either of you recommend a course on tech marketing?
I have taken courses through Autumn, which is the Association of University Technology Managers. They are running most of their courses online right now. This is an organization that pretty much every tech transfer office in the United States and some international belongs to, and it also has a lot of corporate partners as well. And they have these essential skills courses that you can purchase. They always offer them at the annual meeting, which was canceled because it was like the week COVID went crazy and shut the whole world down. And so they're now making them available online. I'm sure there's a price differential for people that are members of Autumn and those that are not. So, if you're not a member of Autumn, you might have to pay a bit more. But I went to the marketing course probably maybe like 4 years ago, and I thought it was really good. You divide it up into teams, and as your team, you were given, well, I guess every team was given the same problem, which was about the cost of manufacturing something. How would you market it? How would you price it? And so it was really nice to have a real world type situation. We found out at the end of the course what the presenter had negotiated for the royalty rate of a license and things like that. And we can compare, what we came up with to what they had actually done in real life.
Thank you. Any add, Raja?
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, Autumn has their trainings. LES, the Licensing Executive Society, has trainings as well that they do and webinars. Just another as an aside, maybe more for students or younger professionals that are interested in this field. There's also degree programs now that can help with commercialization and learning about intellectual property management. There's one that I graduated from, which is Northwestern University. They've got a MS in law program. It's not a JD program. It's taught through their law school, but it's not a JD program. It's a law program and taught by their law professors. You know, if you do it full time, you can do it in 1 year. They also have an online distance program, which is kind of a hybrid program, but that's a great program because you learn all the fundamentals of intellectual property law. You learn about business and entrepreneurship and the legal aspects as well. So that's one. And there's another one that launched recently, and I think they're starting this year, and I think it's in Massachusetts. I believe it's Suffolk College, and they've got a program that's specifically focused. It's a law program, but it's specifically focused in the life sciences. And again, these will give you a lot of these skills on how to, understand science effectively, how to be able to communicate the science to various audiences, and also the legal aspects in terms of whether it's reviewing contracts or negotiating a license. So I think those are some interesting programs to consider. And I'll make one plug here, actually relating to autumn webinars. I'm actually going to be coordinating a webinar on this topic in the near future. So, bringing in some of these schools that have these type of programs, and yeah, definitely attend that if it sounds interesting to you.
Thank you, Raja. We have another question. Has OTC considered a model that generates matches when the marketing abstracts are created instead of just posting in Flintbox?
Yeah, actually last week we saw a presentation by a company that takes an active role in matching the technologies that you submit to their database with companies that are paid subscribers to the database. And I can't speak for the office, but I thought it looked pretty promising, and I think it would be something that we would consider. It's probably based on how much it costs, as is most things in the world. But I can't remember the name of that one. What was it, Raja?
This was In Part.
In Part, yeah. So this company also provides really good semi-annual and annual reports on each technology with metrics about how many connections they've made, and it tracks like how many times people click on a page, and if they keep coming back to that page, then the company will reach out to them and say, hey, it looks like you're interested in this. How about I set up a connection between you and somebody at the University of Kentucky to talk more about this. It's a really proactive platform for making these connections, as opposed to Flintbox, which is passive. The technology is there, and the Flintbox people don't do anything to find companies that are interested in the technology.
Thank you, Natasha. We have another question. Do you do a marketing campaign for every disclosed invention, or do you only do a small percentage of the technologies that are at a certain stage?
Yeah, so not every disclosure that's made to our office is something that's either patentable or ready to be commercialized. So when the C&L team gets involved is after a patent application has been filed. We don't want to do any marketing before that because it could jeopardize the ability to get patent protection if we put some of the proprietary information out there in the public domain. So I would like to say that I wish I knew this number, but we have a pretty good percentage of the active technologies that have made it to the patent application stage on Flintbox, and the information on Flintbox is the same you find in a marketing abstract. Fewer of those receive targeted email campaigns. One of the struggles that I'm sure all technology transfer offices have is identifying people within the companies to make connections with. Like, what is the email address of the head of business development? Like, that can just be really, really hard to find. And this is where our inventors can be a great help. If they know somebody that they have met at a conference, or maybe somebody that worked in their lab or a neighboring lab that now works at a company, then they can make a connection for us. So no, not every invention gets a marketing campaign, but we're trying to increase the percentage of that. And we hope with some help from the student or postdoc that we hire, we can accomplish that.
Thank you. Anything to add, Raja?
No, I think that covered it.
Okay, we have one last question. When you get an industry partner on the line and have conversations with them and the PI from your institution, what are you looking for from the industry partners?
Do you want to go first, Natasha? Or?
Sure. I was just running through a little list in my head. We want to make sure that it's a good fit for the university, that the company has both the technical expertise to develop the technology into a product or service, and also the financial capabilities to do that. We have, I'd say, maybe once a company is interested, I probably have 2 or 3 phone calls with the company and the inventor, because as they have these conversations, they learn more, and then some materials are shared, and the company then has some follow-up questions. And you can really tell on the phone call which companies are excited about the technology and really understand the science and the market and how that technology could be implemented in their companies. If we can, we have these meetings in person, but you know, a lot of the companies that contact us are out of state, or even with the herbicide campaign, I was talking with people in Europe, Japan, and I think Argentina. So in-person meetings, you know, just aren't possible. When I say also that we're marketing these technologies, these are, you know, to companies that are probably, you know, quite well established. A lot of the companies that I target are ones that I find through a whole lot of Googling. And so, you know, if they're turning up in Google searches over and over, they're probably one of the larger companies. And so I'd say probably, you know, the financial aspect isn't as much of a problem with those companies. But we want to know when they license the technology, what their plans are for developing it. In a license agreement, we'll ask for milestones until they make the first sale of a product. We'll say, okay, during the first 5 years, can you give me 3 milestones that you will hit? And then after the license is executed, we work with them and make sure that they're in compliance and see how they're coming along hitting those milestones. So we like to see that they put some real thought in how they can exploit the features of the technology and turn it into a product or service.
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, that what I could add to that, what Natasha said is, you know, I think at a very high level, we value, you know, building that long-term relationship with any company, and that's number one at a kind of a high level. And then beyond that, you know, for me in the life sciences and any of these technologies, like I said, that could be at an early stage, you know, we're really looking for this feedback from the companies to find out, you know, when exactly would they really be interested. You know, if they say that, come back and say, yeah, it's really exciting, it's really novel, it's really interesting, we want to know, like, when exactly do we come back to them? And also, for me, you know, about how do we get more engaged into sponsored research? You know, when might they invest in advancing that technology? So, I mean, these are some of the things that I'd like to know. And then the other thing is how, in the future, in the long run, how do we continue to engage with the company? You know, whether it's who do we email about, certain technologies that we think they may be interested in, but also other things, like I said, this is, a lot of virtual things, virtual events happening, and, when they might be doing virtual events, virtual webinars, or, different ways, or even office hours, that the company might have to give non-confidential feedback. But those are some of the things that I want to know about how to engage with the company and how to build this long-term relationship.
Thanks, Raja and Natasha. It is almost 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and be mindful of time. And thank all of you for attending our webinar on how we market technology. Would like to let you know that we have a webinar coming up on October the 14th. That's called Ask OTC. No presentations, just all of our areas: intellectual property, new ventures, and licensing and commercialization. Will be here to answer all of your questions. So you can register on the OTC website, and make sure you bring your questions with you. And we look forward to seeing you in October. Thank you.